today from the Gaman kitchen with my friend Judy Gaman. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you. This is so much fun.
Yes, and we're doing a holiday treat.
We are, and you know, the best thing about doing this is recently our families had kind of been bonded and blended because your daughter, who's a physician, has joined our practice. So we have just been so excited to get to know you and to get to know your family.
Well, as Judy just said, Judy Gaman is a CEO of Executive Medicine of Texas and an accomplished author and the host of the podcast
Stay Young America.
Stay Young America. Look at this.
So today we're going to be teaching you how to stay young. We're going to be actually doing meals that are healthy. And one thing that's interesting about the holidays is that when you get your family together, I know this is so true in our family, that everyone has different likes. So we do have some people who eat meat or they prefer things, but we also have a lot of vegetarians and we even have a vegan in the family. We want to make sure that there's something at the table for everybody to enjoy. So I'm happy to be here with you, and we're going to put something together that we know even our vegan and vegetarian and non-vegan and non-vegetarians will enjoy.
So it's not just vegan, vegetarian, it's gluten-free?
It is gluten-free. And it's funny you mention that because in our family, sometimes we have to deal with gluten-free, nut-free, dairy-free. I mean, it's kind of like, what do you eat?
Right, and coconut.
And coconut-free, you know, that's mine. I know a lot of people like coconut, so sometimes I just forgo whatever dish has the coconut.
Right, so with that, you get started with a very nice cauliflower roast.
Right, and you know, recently cauliflower's become very popular. I'd say, what, the last 5 years? So it's good because it's healthy and it can be used in so many ways. And here what we've done is we've taken a head, we've cleaned it off, cut off the bottom a little bit, got it nice and ready to go. And this is a really easy dish because all we need to do is put in some of our herbs. So we're gonna take some rosemary. And now it says that you could just set it in there, but I kind of like to, this is good hearty rosemary, so I kind of like to break it up a little bit so that it gets all around the base of the cauliflower. And then we can actually take it out later and cook with it for some gravy. So we'll do that, and we'll take a little bit more on this side and just really kind of sprinkle it in. There's no wrong way to do this. If you wanted to just throw in the sprigs, you could do that too. It's really about personal preference, and sometimes it's about time, because in the holidays, sometimes we're pressed for time.
Absolutely.
And we just have to do whatever seems to work best for the moment. So we put in rosemary, a couple sprigs, and then we'll take some thyme. There's a lot of different variations of thyme, so you can choose whichever one you like best. Now they even have like flavored thyme. You can get like hot and spicy thyme. I know I've grown that in the garden a few times. I love to be able to have things fresh out of the garden. Sometimes in the wintertime, you have to actually put it in your window because depending on where you live, the weather's just not quite right for that.
Yes, coming from New England, we definitely need to put it in the window.
That's
We're
right.
doing this in Texas. So.
That's right. So we have garlic cloves, and because this one is going in and it's going to be roasted for quite some time, we're going to leave the skin on the cloves. We're just going to carefully place them in the bottom here. And then we've got a little bit of sage too, so we'll put some sage in here. And this just is gonna cook up and it's gonna give a lot of flavor.
Yes, I can smell it.
I know.
Yes.
And it's not even in the oven and we can smell the beauty of it. So we want to make sure that when we put the salt and the pepper and the paprika on it, that it's gonna stick. So the best thing to do is to take the butter. Now what we've done here is we took 4 tablespoons of butter and we melted it. And we're only gonna use about half now, and then we'll rebaste it later when we've got just a little bit of time left on. So we wanna make sure that we coat it really nice. And the good thing about cauliflower is it becomes shiny, right?
Yes,
So
and it gives it a golden color once you've done that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the shininess, you can kind of see where it is, so you can go over and find where you missed. And that's it. It looks like it's good. What do you think?
Oh yes,
It's good?
yes, perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take here, we've got some hot paprika.
And if you don't want to use paprika, that's all right too.
Right, it just gives it a nice little color, gives it a little added flavor. And then I love these. I don't know if you have these grinders, but I just love these grinders. They have lights on, you kind of see what you're doing. So just grind it with the salt, then kind of grind it with the pepper a little bit. And that really is to taste. So some people like more salt, more pepper. Be mindful with the salt in case you have someone coming over that has high blood pressure, right?
Oh, yes.
You want to be very careful with that.
And it's okay not to have salt too, because vegetable has its own salt.
That's true.
And with all the flavorings, you can actually do without the salt.
That is a very good point. Yes. I like to use like Himalayan sea salt. What's your favorite salt to use?
I do too.
You do?
Yes.
It has some good health benefits to it.
Absolutely, yes. And with that, we just put it in the oven, 450 degrees for about an hour and 20 minutes.
In about an hour, we'll take it back out.
1 hour, 40 minutes. Correct?
Yes.
So Judy, as we carry on with this, we're now doing the next one.
Yeah, butternut squash stuffed. And I love this because we're really getting a lot of nutrition here. Absolutely. And that's so important. You know, butternut squash itself is high in vitamin A, magnesium, potassium. So people that have trouble sleeping, this is a great vegetable for them. So let's get started on this. So this is butternut squash, and I kind of thought it'd be fun if we did, you do too, and I do too. Now, we gotta talk about that process. So if you've never cut up a butternut squash, then you know it can be difficult. So we cut it up and then we use an ice cream scoop to smooth it out a little bit. But we want to first put in a little vegetable broth. Now we're using organic vegetable broth, and it calls for a half a cup per butternut squash.
Quarter cup of each in each one.
Absolutely.
So yes, the way you scooped it, you cut it into half and then you scooped it using spoon.
Well, ice cream scooper. So, you know, you'll bend a spoon. These things are really tough, but an ice cream scooper tends to work out just right. And I'm gonna go ahead and put in some dairy. So we're gonna put in a cup of heavy whipping cream. I'm gonna use a cup, and then I'm gonna get you a cup to use. So.
Oh my word, look at that.
I know.
That juice is really gonna help cook this in the oven.
Absolutely. Let me get you a cup. And then no, we're using just the bake method. So if you go ahead and change to like convection bake, you want to change your time, maybe turn your temperature down. And if you go pure convection, you definitely want to turn your temperature down and less time. So let's use spinach. Now we have some finely chopped spinach, and we're going to go ahead and place it in here.
And again,
like
another
so.
nice for the phytonutrients, the fine nutrient point, you got iron there.
Yes, and blanching your spinach in boiled salt water for 5 minutes actually helps it a lot as it's cooking, and gives it a little bit of extra flavor as well. So, now one thing that I like to do just to kind of mix it all up is just kind of get it all tucked in there, get it all tucked away, because we want to make a kind of cream spinach here. So that gives us...
Right, we're getting cream spinach.
Cream spinach.
Didn't think about that. We're having butternut and cream spinach in the one dish.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is brilliant.
And while we're tucking it in, we can go ahead and add a little bit of garlic to each of ours and just sprinkle it over. Then you can go ahead and use that spoon to tuck it in. Depending on how much garlic your family is used to, you know, you can cut up what we did here. We did about 7 or 8 cloves, and we minced them, and then we're adding them amongst us. But if you're not a garlic family, that's okay. You don't have to add the garlic. But if you like garlic, it's a great addition here.
Okay, I'm putting cheese on one and I'm not putting on the other. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
But you probably need to put some herbs before the cheese.
Yeah, it's good to add in your herbs. We've got some thyme here. This is fresh from the garden, and I'm going to go ahead and give one to you, and I'm going to do one. And then the thing here, because thyme that can be kind of rough, is you want to just kind of pick it off. Or I like to start at the top and just slide my fingers down. It just comes right off. And then just like you did, I'm going to go ahead and put cheese on these. And I know you're leaving one without cheese, which is good. And then we also have some extra spice here. Tell us about what we're going to add to that. We can put it just on top of the cheese, that's fine.
Right, we're adding some paprika, sweet paprika, just for color and for some brightness in the taste of it. And we're using sweet because, you know, butternut's sweet, right?
Yes. Yeah.
We tend to go, quite often it's just a dessert, correct?
It does, and like we were talking earlier, you know, paprika is so nice because it comes in different versions, the hot, the sweet, the smoked. Smoked I think would be nice on this too. What do you think?
Yes. And I think this looks perfectly well to go in the oven.
I think it's great.
Yes, and we're going to put it at 400 degrees?
400 degrees.
For
about 40 minutes. Because the butternut squash is hard, so we need to give it enough time to go ahead and soften. And how you know it's done is you'll put the fork in it and it'll come out real nice and easy. And when you put it in, it should just slide right in. So what I've done is I went ahead and put some unsalted butter in the pan, and then I'll start adding things to this like onions. We're gonna go ahead and have some onions in here. We're gonna go ahead and have a little bit of thyme. Just going to get this going. Now this is the gravy that we're going to put on the cauliflower, and it's gonna be quite tasty. So we'll put in some rosemary. And thank you, she's brought me over some of the shiitake mushrooms. We'll get them going. And we have the garlic. And the garlic that we have is from when, you may remember, we were cooking the cauliflower. We put them in whole and they have the skins on, but what we've done now is we've taken the skins off and we're going to go ahead and put it in here. We're going to put it in that way, but as we're cooking, we'll just mash it down so that the garlic kind of disseminates within the gravy itself. And now that they're all in here, we're just going to cook that for a little while. We'll add a little broth to that and then a little bit of gluten-free flour to thicken it up as we go. So now that we want to thicken up our gravy, I've added a little bit of vegetable stock and then I've added a little bit of gluten-free flour. But the key here is to do it in little bits, so don't dump it all in at the same time. So I'll go ahead and put a little bit more of our vegetable stock, and then as that's kind of cooking through, I'll just grab a little bit more of that flour and then mix it in. If there's any clumps, you want to go ahead and push those clumps out and just keep cooking it. And as it cooks, you'll notice it's thickening up nice. And you don't want to over thicken it, but you want to make sure that it's the right consistency. So the gravy's done, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to take a ladle and scoop it out and just nicely pour it over our roasted cauliflower. Oh, the aroma, I wish you could smell this. It's just amazing.
Judy, we got this Wellington going right now.
Yes.
Wow.
So one of my favorite dishes before I knew I had to be gluten-free was Wellington, because I love the puff pastry. For me, I'm not a vegetarian, so I love the traditional beef Wellington, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun today to make a vegetarian and gluten-free mushroom Wellington. So the first thing that we have to do is take our mushrooms, and you've already wiped them off. Now, there's some interesting things about mushrooms, and that is that there's a lot of school of thought that says don't wash your mushrooms. Like when I was in Italy and we took a cooking class, they said never wash your mushrooms. Right. But sometimes the mushrooms come a little dirty. So tell us how you kind of got them cleaned up a little bit for us.
So today, this is what you suggested I do, is to take a wet cloth and just wipe it down, which I've done.
Perfect.
But personally, I run it under running water and I try and really get all the water out. Because water does get waterlogged and you don't want that in the mushroom.
And we want to be very careful. A lot of times if the water gets down here, then it can just make a mess of your mushroom, but also make it kind of flimsy.
Right, and this is a nice group from B vitamins.
It is. It's terrific. Now another thing that we're doing, you might notice, is we're placing them upside down. And because we're putting them in a broiling dish, we wanted to make sure that they don't stick. We used avocado oil, just lightly covered the bottom of the pan, the roasting pan, and we're gonna put it in on broil. Now we gotta be very careful because once you do broil, you can go hot real fast.
Absolutely. So, we have it here?
Yep, that one right there is perfect. We'll just slide in.
Just a minute or two, correct?
Yeah, probably about 5 minutes. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that we're putting kale in with it. Now kale is one of those things that if you don't prepare it just right, it's not just tart, but it might just be tough. So we're gonna take it, and we've got some boiling water here that we've added some sea salt to, and we're gonna place it in here. We're just gonna blanch it. So we only want it in here for a short time, just long enough to soften it a little bit, and it's just gonna be absolutely great. We'll put it in here, and then we'll pull it out in a few minutes, and then we'll use it in our beef Wellington.
And you chose not to use the stems, correct?
I chose not to use the stems just because of the dish we're making, but there's a lot of things like salads that you can use the stems in, and it works just fine. And that was just a preference, a personal preference.
We're getting along with our Wellington.
We are, and this is the hardest part, because anytime you're gonna make a puff pastry and you're gonna make it gluten-free, it gets a little hard to do. So practice makes perfect. But the one thing that you have to remember is that you actually have to make a layer of butter. And when I say a layer of butter, we're actually gonna take this parchment paper we've already cut out, and we're going to put a little bit here of flour. This is just a gluten-free flour. Spread it out. And then if you'll unwrap those, and we just want to set them side by side. Now we want to use the parchment paper on either side. We'll even put a little flour here on top of the butter. And the parchment paper is going to protect our butter from getting all over our rolling pin. So if you'll hold the paper, we'll start rolling it. Now this takes a little bit of arm strength, and you just kind of work it out. Kind of go back and forth. And if you don't have someone to hold the paper, that's okay. You can just kind of pound it down until you get it where you need it, and then you can start rolling it out. But we're gonna make this layer, like I said, of butter, and then that butter is gonna get laid on top of the pastry that we made. And we'll put the actual recipe online for you on how to make the pastry dough. And get it into a nice square. Here you go. You kind of see here that it's starting to blend together, and that's what we want to do. We want to make a nice flat slab of butter, so to speak, the way you want. Now what we're going to do, we're going to take a little break, is we're going to just slide this into the refrigerator to keep it cold while we go ahead and roll out the other dough.
We need to get this rolling, right?
We do need to get this rolling. We want to do it while it's still cool. Now the one thing about gluten-free dough is sometimes it gets really hard in the refrigerator, so just work it out, maybe set it out for a minute, not too long. You don't want it too soft. And then you're going to do the same thing that you did really with the butter. You're going to try and roll it out and get a nice flat bit of dough there. And the other thing that's hard sometimes with gluten-free is it tends to break apart a little bit. So what I'm just doing is pushing it back together as I'm rolling it so that we can get a good, nice, even piece. Yeah. And then we'll start folding the butter into it. So we'll take the butter out, we'll lay the butter over it, the butter layer, and then we'll start just folding it back in. So what we've done is exactly what we spoke of. We took the butter layer and we placed it over the pastry layer. And now what we're going to do is we're going to fold and then just re-roll. So fold and re-roll. So kind of fold it into it. And then again, we'll take our paper, lay it over, because this is what keeps your rolling pin nice and clean. And you'll just roll it and then roll it together. So we're just going to take a look at what's happening here. And we can see that it's time for us to fold it again. So we want to go ahead and fold it into itself. So
the heat of the lights is melting a little bit, right?
The heat of the lights, and then also just the friction of the rolling pin.
Yeah.
But the whole thing here is to intertwine the butter with the pastry dough so that it makes it flaky. Because the butter is really what gives it that flakiness. So just gonna kind of take a look, see where we are. And again, it's very buttery and the pastry's there, but we want to just keep folding it because it's that fold that keeps it happening. And then we can tell here that our butter is actually getting a little soft. So once we fold it over, we'll probably put it in the fridge and then we'll come back to you.
Judy is really done well with her Wellington pastry, puff pastry.
Rolling it out.
While she's doing that, we sliced up the mushroom. We've got the blanched kale out.
We did.
And I'm enjoying the liquid of it. It's actually
It's very healthy for you.
absolutely.
I'm impressed. So we're making the mushroom Wellington, and we're going to have kale in it, and we're going to have some different flavors going on, but we want to bring in just a touch of sweetness, and a good way to do that is to use dates. So get some pitted dates. It's always better if they're already pitted. I like to get those in a package. They just come just like this, and then just cut them up, just slice them, and we'll sprinkle them in as we start creating our Wellington. So now that we have our pastry dough all ready, we're going to go ahead and start building it. Now what we want to do is make a nice layer of those dates I talked about on the bottom. And as we put those there, just remember this is what's going to add the sweetness. Now this is the bottom here, but when we're done, it'll be the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then what we're going to do next is we'll take a little bit of our kale that we prepared. Kind of put that
You don't want
here.
too much, right?
We're going to make a few of these, so we'll just prepare one of these now. We'll layer the mushrooms on here quite nicely. When we cut this up, it's going to be really pretty. And we'll actually have a little gravy that'll go with it, so it'll be nice. So we're going to go ahead and fold it up, and we'll put it in the oven, and we'll take a look when it's out. So we fold it up quite nicely. What you want to do is button it up, so always take those sides like we did the ends and tuck it in. So I've got our nice little mushroom Wellington in here. And one thing we want to do is brush it with a little bit of oat milk. And because we're making this dairy-free, we're using oat milk. And we'll just brush it on there and give it a nice little glaze and help it to brown up. Now, because we're using oat milk, it doesn't have any fat like you would normally see in dairy. So we've got a little bit of truffle oil. You can use any kind of oil you'd like. I just happen to have a little truffle oil here in my little spray bottle. So I'm just going to spray a little oil over it just to give it a little bit of fat. And then I'm going to pop it in the oven.
Judy is going to be making the gravy on the stove shortly. I'm just getting some shiitake mushroom ready for the gravy.
So this is an allergy-free stuffing. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start getting the vegetables that go inside of our stuffing ready. Got my pan nice and hot, put a little bit of vegetable broth in here. And I've got some celery that's ready to go. And I've got some onions that are ready to go. Just a little bit more celery. A few more onions. And we're going to cook that down, and then we're going to go ahead and add it to our cornbread muffin that's been already dried out and ready to go for stuffing.
Judy has made us some really good gluten-free muffins to go with our good holiday meal today. And I'm breaking it up to make the stuffing later to put in the oven to dry off a little bit. The best part of the meal, right?
I know.
Stuffing.
The stuffing. Everyone looks forward to the stuffing.
Right.
So this is going to be a gluten-free, allergy-free, with the exception of corn, because there's cornmeal in it.
But you got organic corn.
I
It's a very big
did
difference.
get organic corn. So now we've really done all the prep work. So we're going to take our muffins, which have been crumbled and dried, and pour them in. We're going to take our vegetables and our herbs. So after you saw me put the vegetables in, we did add some herbs. We added some thyme and we added some parsley. And we're just going to mix these in here. So we're going to mix those together nicely. And we could add a little salt and pepper, just a little bit to taste. Again, I love these things. A little light comes on, you can see what you're doing there. And then of course we want to take the vegetable broth and just pour it over there, because this is how it's going to blend all the flavors together when we place it in the oven.
Right, so another 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Well, thank you so much for preparing the mousse.
Yes, you made a very nice chocolate mousse, and you want to just go over what we put in there?
Avocados, so some good fat, good for the brain.
Omega-3, yes. And we've had some maple syrup and some, all the good things in there. Cocoa.
Cocoa, very good for you.
Very good for you, absolutely.
Yeah, so one of the cool things about if you have cooking utensils that you use to bake pies and decorate pies, is you can use them for other things. So I just took a bag that we normally would use for frosting and a tip, and then we just put the mousse in. And then we're going to take a little bit of some fresh mint out of the garden, and we'll just kind of place it on top to garnish it.
This is quite a feast.
It is. I'm so excited. It took us quite a while, but it was a lot of fun.
And you turned out your Wellington absolutely flaky, as we could tell.
Yes, it is flaky.
It looked very yummy.
So I can't wait to taste it. I think it'll be good, and I think our guests will like it as well.
Oh, absolutely. And our cauliflower, look at that.
I know. Who knew? And the way the gravy just floats over the top of that cauliflower, it's eye-catching.
Absolutely. And you made 3 absolute centerpieces. I mean, each one could be used as one and you make other side dishes, but it makes it very nice. Well, complements each other very well.
Couldn't have done it without you.
It's mostly your idea. We have all the nutrients added in, and this very, very, very yummy.
Yeah, the stuffing. It's a different stuffing that we made in the past year, so we'll see if it's a crowd favorite.
Yes.
I think it'll be good, and we really up the nutrition game.
Absolutely, with your avocado mousse.
The avocado mousse, the kale, the mushrooms, the butternut squash, all of it. And thank you so much for having me.
Judy, thank you so much, and happy holiday to you and your family.
Same to you.
And happy holidays to everyone out there. I'm your host, Untitled with Judy Gaman. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.